My name is Marissa Delaney, I'm 42, and my husband is suing me to take the inheritance my late father left me. If you've ever faced something like this, comment where you're reading from. On Thursday at 16:40, while the fluorescent lights in courtroom 5 buzzed faintly, I caught the faint chemical smell of floor polish clinging to the air. It mixed with the stale perfume of the woman sitting behind me, sharp and cloying. My palms stuck slightly to the leather strap of my bag, where a blue folder rested, too ordinary an object for something that could change everything. Across the aisle, he sat in a gray three-piece suit I had bought him in Chicago 2 years ago, tapping a Mont Blanc pen against the table like he owned the rhythm of the room. His lawyer shuffled papers, thick stacks bound with neon tabs. I watched his lips curl in that same half-smile he used to give me over dinner, back when he'd bring home tulips on a Wednesday for no reason. Now it looked more like mockery. The claim was simple, at least the way he presented it. After 11 years together, half of all marital assets were ours, including the $1.9 million estate my father had transferred to me 18 months earlier. He leaned back in his chair as his attorney recited figures, making it sound like I had won a lottery ticket that he automatically had rights to. I noticed 2 reporters scribbling notes in the gallery, one of them mouthed "million" to the other, eyes widening as if they were watching a spectacle. I shifted slightly and the edge of the folder pressed into my ribs through the fabric of my blazer. My father's handwriting was inside there, alongside signatures and seals that my husband had once dismissed as legal noise. The irony almost made me smile. The judge, a narrow-faced man with rimless glasses, adjusted the clock on the bench, tapping it until the second hand ticked again. "Mrs. Delaney," he said, glancing directly at me, "you'll have the opportunity to respond after counsel finishes." My throat felt dry, but my resolve was sharper than it had been in months. I looked across at the man I'd once trusted more than anyone, the man who thought he was about to strip away not just my money but the last piece of my father's legacy. I didn't know yet that in 48 hours, his entire strategy would collapse in front of everyone. The following morning at 7:15, I was in the kitchen of my apartment on North Wabash Avenue, standing barefoot on the cold tile, waiting for the kettle to hiss. Steam fogged the small window above the sink, where the Chicago skyline looked muted and gray. I set 2 slices of rye bread in the toaster, the mechanical click oddly loud in the silence. My sister had stayed the night, curled on the sofa bed with a blanket patterned in faded sunflowers. She stirred when the toaster popped, hair a mess, and muttered, "He's not going to stop, you know." I didn't answer immediately. I spread butter across the toast, watched it melt into uneven yellow streaks. Then I said, "He thinks he's entitled. He always has." On the counter lay an unopened envelope, thick, cream paper with a faint watermark. It had arrived by courier 2 days ago, stamped confidential, asset division strategy. I hadn't opened it, but I knew exactly what it contained, a formal notice of his intention to claim part of my father's estate. I sat down at the small oak table. My sister pulled her knees up, balancing her coffee mug in both hands. "Marissa, you have the paperwork, right?" "In the folder," I said, nodding toward my bag. "Every page." The clock on the microwave blinked 7:32. I was supposed to meet my attorney at 9 o'clock on LaSalle Street. I checked my phone, 7 missed calls from him overnight, plus 2 text messages, each only a few words long. "We can settle this. Don't make it ugly." The nerve of it made my jaw tighten. He was the one dragging me into court, the one trying to rewrite promises we had made in calmer years. I stood up abruptly, the chair legs scraping against tile. "I'm done playing defense," I said. "If he wants a fight, I'll give him one. But this time on my terms." My sister raised her eyebrows but didn't argue. She just slid the buttered dish toward me, a small gesture that grounded me more than any pep talk could. I slipped the blue folder into my bag, zipped it shut, and slung it over my shoulder. The weight was reassuring. It wasn't just paper, it was my father's foresight, my attorney's precision, and my last line of defense. As I locked the apartment door at 8:04, the hallway smelled faintly of fresh paint and something chemical. My chest tightened, but not from fear anymore. It was resolve, solid and cold. When I think back, the pattern was always there, threads I ignored because I wanted to believe in us. 11 years ago, we met at a networking event in St. Louis. I'd just turned 31, still wearing my father's old Omega wristwatch as a talisman while I tried to grow my design consultancy beyond 3 clients. He walked up with 2 glasses of Cabernet and that rehearsed ease, telling me, "You're the most focused person in this room." I laughed, flattered. I didn't notice he never asked about the work itself, only about the contracts, the invoices, the numbers. Our first months together were dizzying. He booked weekends in Nashville, ski trips in Vermont, a dinner at a rooftop restaurant where the bill was nearly $400. "I believe in living well," he said, shrugging, as though generosity came as naturally as breathing. I didn't know then that every dollar came from credit cards he never intended to pay on time. The contrast was sharp when I inherited the first small portion of my father's estate, a parcel of farmland in Indiana valued at $260,000. My husband's eyes shone in a way that wasn't love. "This opens doors," he said, as if he were the rightful co-owner. My father's lawyer had carefully explained the protections, and I'd signed agreements keeping the property separate. At the time, it felt like legal fussing. Now I understood. The real stake came 18 months ago, when my father died at 78. I remember the phone call from the executor, a trust valued at $1.9 million, mostly in municipal bonds, plus a cedarwood house in Evanston, 2,300 square feet, with his library of over 900 books. It wasn't just money, it was decades of my father's work as a civil engineer, careful saving, deliberate choices. His handwriting on ledgers. His neat signatures on bank slips. My husband's reaction was telling. "We're set," he said, wrapping his arms around me in the kitchen. "We can finally live the way we deserve." He never said you. Always we. Over the next year, his spending ballooned. He leased a Tesla Model S for appearances. He wired $18,500 into a friend's tech startup, which folded in 6 months. He joined a golf club with a $12,000 annual fee. I covered household expenses from my own income, while he dipped into joint accounts without asking. And now, in court, the numbers were his weapons. He wanted not only half of our savings, but also half of the inheritance that legally wasn't his. That was what was at stake, not just money, but the last intact thing my father had left me. I had tolerated charm turning into entitlement, generosity masking control. But the line had been crossed. The first time I held the document in my hands, it was late at night, almost midnight. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I'd pulled the blue folder from the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, where it had rested untouched for nearly a decade. The paper smelled faintly of dust and ink. Inside were 3 stapled sets, each stamped with the notary's raised seal. My fingers traced the embossed circle like it was a shield. Across the top line, post-nuptial agreement, signed March 12, 2014. I remembered the conversation as clearly as if it were yesterday. My father had sat with me in his den, the yellow-shaded lamp casting soft light over the oak desk. "Marissa," he'd said, sliding the draft across the wood, "I know this feels unromantic, but protection is love too. This keeps what I've built in our family." I'd felt uneasy back then. My husband had waved it off, chuckling. "Legal jargon. If it makes you and your dad sleep better, fine." He'd signed with a flourish, a black Pilot G2 pen, joking, "Guess I'm promising not to run off with the silverware." Now, 10 years later, the ink had not faded. His name was there in bold strokes, under the clause that any inheritance received by me during the marriage would remain separate property. No division. No claim. I flipped to section 5. My own initials, small and precise, were next to every paragraph. His initials too, Messier, rushed. At the bottom, the notary's signature, Angela Torres, Cook County, Illinois. I slipped the top page out of the plastic sleeve, held it up to the kitchen light. The watermark shimmered faintly. It was authentic. A line I'd underlined in pencil years ago leapt at me now: "Neither party shall assert any right, claim, or interest in the other's separate inheritance. I heard his voice from just last week, loud in our hallway. You can't lock me out of what's ours. You think a piece of paper means anything? I whispered to the empty room, yes. It does. The weight in my chest shifted. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was certainty. I made a choice then, sliding the agreement back into its sleeve and into the blue folder. Tomorrow, I would hand it to my attorney. Tomorrow, his arrogance would meet paper he couldn't argue away. 2 days later, I sat in a narrow office on LaSalle Street, across from my attorney. The blinds were half closed, filtering the late afternoon light into strips that cut across the wood desk. A faint scent of toner hung in the air, a copy machine clicked and words somewhere down the hall. She adjusted her glasses, flipping through the agreement page by page. The blue folder sat open between us, my father's foresight spread out under fluorescent light. Her nails tapped against the notary seal. This is ironclad, she said at last. Executed March 12, 2014, notarized, witnessed. He had the option to seek independent counsel and waived it. That's in black and white. I exhaled slowly. He's demanding half of the inheritance. The $1, $9 million, the Evanston house, everything. Her mouth curved, not quite a smile. Then he's wasting everyone's time. Illinois law is clear, inheritance is non-marital property unless commingled. And from the bank statements you gave me, she tapped a separate folder, you never touched those funds for household expenses. You paid bills out of your consulting income. Correct? Correct, I said. My voice didn't waver. She pushed her chair back slightly, folded her hands. The hearing is set for March 27, 9:30 a.m. That gives us 8 days. He'll try bluster, maybe claim you misled him. But this agreement, plus the account history, closes every gap. I looked down at my hands on the table. My wedding band still sat on my finger, though it felt more like a shackle than a symbol. What about the house? I asked quietly. The Evanston property was deeded to you alone by your father's trust. Title records confirm it. He has no claim. She flipped another page from her notes. If he pushes, he'll look desperate. Judges don't like desperation. Her certainty was grounding, like a hand steadying me on uneven ground. The office clock ticked loudly at 4:18. Outside, I could hear a bus braking, the hiss echoing between tall buildings. 8 days, I repeated. She nodded. 8 days until the truth is formalized. Stay calm. Don't respond to his calls. Let him talk himself into a corner. I closed the folder carefully, smoothing the edges with my palm. The cool laminate against my skin steadied me. For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't bracing against a storm. I was standing in it, with proof strong enough to hold. The morning of March 27 arrived sharp and cold, the kind of Chicago chill that cut straight through a wool coat. I carried the blue folder against my ribs like armor as I walked into the Daily Center. The lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee from the kiosk by security. My heels clicked on the marble floor, steady and measured. In courtroom 8, his lawyer began with practiced confidence. Your Honor, my client has been married to Mrs. Delaney for 11 years. He has contributed immeasurably to her lifestyle and therefore is entitled to equitable division, including half of the $1, $9 million inheritance. I sat still, hands folded in my lap. My attorney leaned closer and whispered, "Wait for the pivot." When it was our turn, she rose, slid the blue folder across the polished wood, and said evenly, Your Honor, we submit into evidence a postnuptial agreement dated March 12, 2014. Signed, notarized, and witnessed. Clause 5 explicitly bars either party from claiming rights to the other's inheritance. We also submit bank statements showing Mrs. Delaney kept all inherited funds in separate accounts. No commingling occurred. The judge adjusted his rimless glasses. Mr. Delaney, did you sign this document? He shifted in his chair, face flushed. She told me it was just a formality. I didn't know it meant. Did you sign it? The judge pressed. His voice dropped. Yes. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the ceiling vents. His lawyer stood, scrambling. Your Honor, my client was misled. He did not have independent counsel. My attorney cut in smoothly. Clause 7, Mr. Delaney waived that right in writing. She tapped the page with her pen. His initials are here. The judge's brow furrowed. He flipped through the document, lips moving as he read. Finally, he looked up. Mr. Delaney, this agreement is valid. It binds you. Your claim to the inheritance is dismissed. Across the aisle, I watched his jaw tighten, a flicker of panic breaking through the facade. His pen stopped tapping. I felt a strange quiet inside me, not triumph, not yet, but the certainty that the lever had shifted. The balance of power wasn't his anymore. The ruling didn't end his theatrics. If anything, it unmasked them. The very next week, I came home from work to find 3 voicemails on my phone, each angrier than the last. You're humiliating me, he hissed in the third message. Do you think you'll walk away clean? I gave up everything for you. But the court order was clear. The inheritance stayed separate. What remained on the table were our shared accounts, the joint credit card balances, and his self-inflicted debts, more than $64,000 spread across 3 cards and a defaulted lease. I met my sister at the Evanston house one Saturday morning to walk through the rooms. The place still smelled faintly of cedar and old paper, my father's scent lingering in the library. She ran her hand along the mahogany shelves. It's safe now, she said simply. Safe. That word meant more than money. Meanwhile, he was unraveling. The golf club froze his membership when dues went unpaid. The Tesla dealership repossessed his car after 3 missed payments. At the office, whispers started. A colleague of mine forwarded me a screenshot of him boasting at a bar, claiming, my wife's inheritance is basically ours. The irony landed sharp now that the judge's dismissal was public record. One evening, I sat at my oak dining table with a legal pad and calculator, sketching numbers. Between my consulting income, roughly $118,000 annually, and the inheritance safely cordoned off, I could absorb the settlement's small ripples. But him? He'd be carrying his debts alone. I called my attorney to confirm. So he walks away with nothing? I asked. Not nothing, she corrected. He walks away with what he earned. In this case, debts. The line went quiet for a moment before she added, that's justice, Marissa. Not vengeance. I hung up, staring at the notepad where the math lined up cleanly. The balance sheet told the truth, I wasn't ruined. I was free. And yet freedom felt less like fireworks and more like a steady, quiet breath, the first one I'd taken without bracing. 2 weeks after the ruling, a second envelope appeared in my mailbox, cream paper again, but thinner this time. His handwriting scrawled across the back, we'll see who wins in the end. Inside was a copy of a credit card statement, circled in red ink. Charges from vacations in Cancun, dinners at Alinea, even the deposit for our 10th anniversary party at a loft in River North. His note read, these were joint experiences. You owe me for half. I sat at my kitchen counter, the dishwasher humming behind me, statement spread flat against the cool quartz. My fingers traced the numbers, $1, $2.75 here, $3,410 there. Every line item tied to memories, a margarita by the pool, the sound of jazz echoing in a high-ceilinged dining room. He was trying to recast indulgences he'd insisted on as obligations I now owed. I forwarded the document to my attorney with a short message, he's pushing again. She called within the hour. Marissa, these are marital expenses paid from joint accounts. Standard. The court already divided what little joint balance you had. He has no claim to reimbursements. But he's framing them like debts, I said. That's smoke, she replied. The truth gap closed when the judge accepted the postnup. Everything else is bluster. That night, he called. His voice was sharp, almost pleading under the anger. You can't just erase 11 years. You can't say none of it mattered. I steadied my tone. It mattered. But it doesn't entitle you to what my father left me. Silence stretched for a beat. Then he spat, "You'll regret this," before hanging up. I set the phone down carefully, the glass screen cold against my palm. For the first time, his threats didn't rattle me. The record was clear, the paper trail sealed. His countermoves were just noise against facts that couldn't be undone. I poured myself a glass of water, the clink of ice against the tumbler crisp in the quiet kitchen. No way back for him. No need for me to defend anymore. 3 months later, the Evanston house feels different, lighter. I've painted the upstairs bedroom pale sage, dragged a second-hand desk into the corner, and made it my office. In the mornings, I sit by the window with a mug of black tea, listening to the low rumble of the metro trains passing 2 blocks away. The sound used to make me restless. Now it feels like rhythm, like life moving forward. The legal battles are over. The inheritance remains intact. The debts are his alone, and the court order makes it final. I haven't heard his voice in 6 weeks. The calls stopped after his credit card company sued him, and I didn't return the last one. Boundaries now are simple, almost boring. I don't answer blocked numbers. I don't read letters without a lawyer's return address. My finances stay in separate accounts. My consulting work continues steadily. I signed a new client in May, a project worth $42,000 over 6 months. I keep the blue folder in the fireproof box in my closet, under folded blankets. I don't need to open it anymore, but knowing it's there steadies me. Evenings are quiet. Sometimes my sister comes by with takeout, and we eat at the oak dining table without talking about courtrooms or lawyers. Other nights, I walk the neighborhood, past the library where my father once volunteered. The air smells of lilacs this time of year, and the light lingers longer. I don't frame it as victory. It isn't that. It's survival, clarity, and the choice to live without someone else's shadow pressing down. Tonight, I lock the front door, set down my keys in the ceramic dish my father brought back from Lisbon, and breathe. My life fits inside my own hands again. I stand by the window, watching the trains slide past in the distance, and let the quiet strength settle. I am not waiting for another battle. I am simply here, steady, planning months ahead, renovating the library, cataloging my father's books, signing the next contract for my firm. I am choosing myself. And this time, that choice is enough.